Welcome to Ask the Attorney. I'm Susan Tierney and this is Scott Horne. And today we're going to talk about a subject that I get questioned all the time, and I know you do as well. And it's insurance. And how do you handle insurance on an owner finance transaction? So that's my question.
Yeah. Well, you know, Susan, it starts off, and I always tell all the investors, go right to the horse's mouth and go to the insurance professional.
Yes.
That is always your best resource to get answers. Get it from people who are in the industry. I get it that we are knowledgeable, but we should be a secondary source in that instance.
Okay. Okay. What about getting insurance on an acquisition?
Well, you know, when an investor is buying a property, let's say, you know, I always remind them they need to get their back-end strategy down first. What's going to be their exit strategy?
Right.
Are they buying this as a rental property? Are they going to buy it to fix and flip and sell it and cash out? Or is it going to be some type of a creative finance or an owner finance on the back end, like a wraparound mortgage maybe? It's important to understand the differentiation.
And they need to know that, the insurance people need to know that because there's different insurance for each thing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You know, if you're going to buy a home as a rental property, you probably want to get just a basic fire and extended coverage policy. Maybe there'll be a vacancy clause rider on there. Maybe there'll be some minor repair clause rider. Again, the insurance company can steer you through all of that. You know, if the level of rehab is larger, maybe it would be a builder's risk policy. Now, if you're going to buy, fix, and flip that property, where it's going to be a short-term transaction, again, let the insurance company dictate whether you need a builder's risk policy for the amount of repairs you might be doing, or something a little bit less. So you've got to understand that, though.
Okay.
But then from there, if you do a seller finance, knowing that you're going to be selling this and there's going to be a back-end home buyer who will eventually get their policy. Now, at this point, we might want to try to be added on to the existing policy as a party of interest, maybe for a short time frame. Maybe your insurance company can issue some type of a secondary builder's risk policy if you're doing, let's say, some major repairs to that property before you sell the house with seller financing.
Okay.
But once that property is sold to that back-end home buyer, then of course we're going to want our new buyer to obtain a new one-year prepaid policy of their choosing. And then it's important to know how to structure that deal.
Okay.
If that homeowner is getting that new one-year policy, we want to ensure that the original seller is a named insured and that the back-end home buyer is a named insured. We will make certain that our mortgage company, of course, is the primary loss payee, and then we as the investor become the secondary loss payee.
Okay. Is it different if the property was purchased subject to?
Well, especially subject to, that's where you've got to ensure that original seller is a named insured. I want you to think about this for a minute. This is really easy. The mortgage company, of course, their borrower is the seller. They're the guys on the note. That's who they want to see as the person covered by the policy.
Right.
And when you send that insurance policy to the mortgage company, if they're not listed on there as an insured of some type, they will kick it out. And we don't want that to happen.
Right, because then it would trigger due on sale or make them suspicious.
It certainly could. And our
Okay.
goal is to limit those issues as best as possible.
Okay. So they can be added to the current policy.
Well, again, that's really a question for the insurance company that has that policy. I will tell you that some say yes and some say no, but you have to ask.
Okay. So how do we set it all up? Is it, you know, how much should we get? I know you, just from your experience, I know you should ask your insurance agent this, but is it based on the value of the home?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So in my experience, when I'm buying that property, you know, I like to make sure that I have at least 80% coverage. So if the after repaired value of the property is $200,000, I want to ensure I have at least $160,000 in coverage.
Okay.
Now, does that mean I can rebuild my home for $160,000? Maybe, maybe not. That may not be replacement value. But again, maybe I don't have to have replacement value.
Right.
Now, if you have bought a home subject to, different ballgame at that point, but I think it's still the same consideration. You need to make sure you have sufficient insurance to cover any existing debt.
Okay.
And keep in mind, if there was a casualty loss, let's say the house burnt down, so now all you've got is vacant land. That land is worth something. You don't need to insure the property for $200,000 and try to collect it all. You may not be able to collect all of that from the insurance company, but the 160 is a good number because that property is going to be worth at least 20% of the after repaired value of that property in most cases.
Okay. What about shorter term insurance policies? Would you advise that, or should they be long term?
You know, I see so many investors, they try to short circuit things. They try to be, let's just call it what it is. They try to cheap out the situation. They try to save a buck. They want to either do a month-to-month policy. I don't like that because there's a huge risk that it could lapse, and there's a casualty loss in that lapse time, you got a problem. Now, if there's an existing mortgage company or a bank, they're not going to allow you to do that, period. Minimum 6 months. But the best thing to do is to do that 1 year prepaid policy. Why? It's customary, it's ordinary, it's industry standard, and it keeps things simple. And again, in our business, especially if we're dealing with a subject to type transaction, we want to keep things as simple, customary, and ordinary as possible.
Okay. What about double insuring? Would you
Oh, Lord.
recommend that? No?
You know, I still see that so often today, and I know there's a lot of good information out there about why not to do that, right? And so many investors think, well, I thought I could just keep that existing policy in place and then get my own policy. And you go, great, but what if? And this is where investors fail. They don't ever go to that what if position. So what if there is a casualty loss on the property? And what if insurance company 1 finds out there's insurance company 2, and they go, you pay for it. I'm not paying for it. And they go, no, you pay for it, not me. Who's going to pay for it? Both? None? I call that, I called it here a prehistoric cat fight because it's going to be huge.
Yeah.
You know, don't go there. Don't double insure one policy on one property, and make sure whoever the owner is insured.
Okay. Now, what are some of the most common questions you get from home buyers who have to pay an insurance policy at closing and pay escrow? What are their questions?
You know, so often we get pushback, Susan, because you tell your home buyer that they need to come to closing with a 1 year prepaid insurance policy. Now, I like to do that and like to explain to them and say, look, this is what everybody who buys a house in America does. If you're getting a mortgage, if you're going to a bank, you're providing them a 1 year prepaid policy. Okay, you get past that hurdle. But then they come back and say, well, why am I paying escrow going forward? I've already paid for it for 1 year. And of course, you've got to learn how to respond. And the simple answer is all homeowners are going to pay insurance twice in the first year, because you're going to pay 1/12 each month into the escrow account, so that when the anniversary date of that policy comes up, there is sufficient funds to pay for that policy again. What we don't want to do is to have this policy lapse and then there to be a casualty loss. So we want whoever is holding escrow to hold that so they can pay it timely and take care of things for us.
Okay. Then can I come back and collect escrow revenues?
Well, the answer is yes, but the question really is not collect escrow revenues. I really think it is, sometimes I see a lot of investors who want to charge what we call prepaid escrows, where at closing they want to collect an extra 1 or 2 months of escrow reserve. So in other words, besides providing a 1 year policy, besides starting to make payments every month into the escrow account, they want the borrower to pay an extra 1 or 2 months into that account. I've seen some investors try to collect 3 or 4 months in there. It's too much. Now, sometimes that's a good thing because it helps to offset any changes that might come up. You know, for instance, on a future anniversary date, what if the price goes up a little bit? It'd be nice to have the money there to cover that if necessary. But policies aren't going to jump up that much along the way typically, okay?
Right.
Unless the borrower changes it. And I've got a little bit different philosophy on this because typically in the owner finance world, our borrowers are paying a very large down payment. You know, the average down payment, I think, for America is probably about 3.5%, like on an FHA loan per se. That's it. You know, they pay some closing costs and fees. Our buyers are paying 10%, and they're paying closing costs. But what else is our buyer doing? Our buyer is paying a much higher interest rate, sometimes double, sometimes triple what a typical loan might be right now. We as an investor, we're already collecting a lot of money on this thing. And I'm not a big fan of going back to ask for more. They're paying more already.
Right.
Doesn't mean you can't do it.
Yeah.
I think everybody's different. It's just think through it in certain ways so that each investor can make their own decision as to what is right for them.
Okay. What about the servicer? Does the servicer pay it? So you have the first year ahead of time. Then when does the servicer come in and pay
And take control? Well, when a transaction is closed, of course, we always like to recommend the insertion of a third-party loan servicer into a transaction, right? And so while the servicer is there, when you set up the transaction initially, maybe it's mid-year. It's July the 1st. So at this time, the seller, maybe that's us, the investor, are responsible for 6 months of insurance, and the home buyer starts to make payments, say July 1, pays escrow. So I like to suggest to the investor world, go ahead and prepay your 6 months of escrow at closing. Get it out of the way in that instance, okay?
Okay.
Fund the account, as we call it, so that the first 6 months are paid, and now the home buyer is going to make payments into their escrow account going forward. Now, let's backtrack just a little bit. Let's say, for instance, the investor had bought the home subject to the existing debt, and there is an existing escrow account. We're not worried about going backwards because taxes, every time that payment is made, that mortgage company is already escrowing it. So really, a current servicer in that instance is just going to do a pass-through.
Right.
They're going to collect the escrow from the borrower that goes into the investor's account that then goes to the mortgage company's escrow account.
Okay.
So just, again, the key there is know what you're doing, how it works, the ebb and flow. If you do not have an underlying existing escrow account, pre-fund your escrow account, get it taken care of. Don't wait to year end to find out that you're short on money. That could then affect your borrower.
Right.
Get it done.
Okay. We get so many people calling going, my insurance company doesn't do wraps. Who would you recommend? And it seems like there's not a lot of recommendations for insurance companies that do wraps. But if you're looking for recommendations, please reach out to us at the Owner Finance Network. We have here in Texas, at least, we have some recommendations for you. But why do you think that is? They just don't understand it?
I think just different companies have different philosophies and different things they want to do. Some are going to handle commercial, some are going to handle residential, some are going to handle traditional residential transactions, and some may just don't want to mess with it.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a direct answer anywhere. It's just the nature of the beast.
Okay.
So we as investors just do what we do, hunt down the best people, interview them, get the answers we need, go forward.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining me here today.
Thanks, Susan.
Mr. Horne. We will see you on the next episode. Check out theownerfinancenetwork.com for more Ask the Attorney videos.